I'm Enya Bell, 30, female. I'm a master ceramicist and the proud owner of Fire and Form, a successful studio and gallery where I teach classes and sell my high-end work. I live in an apartment above my commercial space, completely immersed in my creative, self-made life. I built my business from the ground up, only to have my parents and sister try to bulldoze it when I was gone. But their attempts at a family partnership ended with them finding out exactly how hard I bite when cornered. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The phone call came 4 months into my sabbatical. My life was finally perfect. I'd spent 8 years pouring every dollar, every hour, and every ounce of creative energy into Fire and Form. It was my baby, my triumph. We had a great commercial lease, a solid reputation, a waiting list for classes, and 2 industrial-grade kilns. I had finally earned a 4-month sabbatical in Japan to study traditional raku firing techniques. A trip that was both professional necessity and a lifetime dream. I left my studio in the hands of my trusted assistant, Mark, a recent art school graduate who was fiercely loyal and hyper-competent. The agreement was clear, documented, and paid. Mark would manage the class schedule, handle online orders, and maintain the equipment. The first 3 months were bliss. Long emails detailing Mark's success, photos of beautiful glazes, and quiet confidence that my business was thriving without me. Then came the call that snapped my reality in half. It wasn't Mark, it was my mother, Eleanor Bell, the family manager. "Anya, darling? A terrible thing has happened," she started, her voice heavy with manufactured drama. "That old kiln of yours, the smaller one, it's completely broken. Mark was pushing it too hard, I suspect. It's a total write-off." I froze. That kiln, an old scut, was robust. It wasn't my main kiln, but it was essential for test tiles and smaller class firings. More importantly, Mark was meticulous. Broken how, mother? Did the coils fail? Did the computer malfunction? I asked, immediately skeptical. "Details, Anya, really?" she scoffed. "It's ruined. Beyond repair. And your father and I, well, we've taken care of it. We cleared it out." My blood ran cold. "Mother, no. You don't clear out a commercial kiln. It needs professional appraisal. Did you even call Mark?" There was a pause. Mark was, shall we say, busy. And frankly, Anya, he wasn't managing the space well. The paperwork was sloppy. "So, we've actually had to make some changes. Good changes." That's when she dropped the bombshell. My sister, Chloe Bell, who had recently failed spectacularly at a corporate event planning venture and was unemployed, had moved in. "Chloe has a real eye for presentation, Anya. She's taken over the front gallery and is managing the classes. She's calling it Fire and Family." My entire professional life, built on my sweat and talent, had been commandeered by my jobless sister and unilaterally renamed by my parents. I was furious, my Japanese piece shattered. "You replaced me. You put Chloe in my studio, handling my classes, renaming my business. And you removed my equipment without my permission. Is this a joke?" My mother quickly turned defensive. "It's family, Anya. Chloe needs a stable job, and honestly, that apartment above the studio is sitting empty. She's just trying to help. Besides, the lease is technically in your father's name for tax purposes, you know that." That was the bitter, undeniable truth. When I started out, my parents signed the commercial lease for better rates, and out of simplicity, they kept the primary signatory status. It was a favor I now realized was a leash. I cut my sabbatical short, canceling my raku workshops. I called Mark, who answered in hushed tones, clearly terrified. He confirmed everything. Chloe had arrived with Mom and Dad, asserted family authority, changed the locks to the front office, and immediately started rearranging my carefully curated gallery. The small kiln was indeed gone, carted off by my father and a rental truck. Mark was relegated to a cleanup role in the back, terrified of losing his small income, but he was gathering evidence for me. The audacity was astounding. They hadn't just used my absence, they had actively tried to erase my professional identity and replace it with my struggling sister's name, all under the guise of family help. I booked the first flight home, my mind already spinning with the cold, hard mathematics of contract law and familial retribution. I wasn't just losing my studio, I was losing the respect of the only people I thought I could trust, and I was gonna make them pay for every single inch of clay they had touched. Stepping back into fire, Inform felt like walking into a crime scene. The air, usually thick with the comforting, dusty scent of clay and the metallic tang of glaze, now smelled vaguely of cheap perfume and stale instant coffee, Chloe's signature blend. The front gallery, my carefully minimalist space designed to highlight the beauty of the fired work, was cluttered. Chloe had installed a hideous, ornate velvet rope system, framed photos of the Bell family on the retail counter, and slapped up a hastily printed, amateurish sign that read, "Fire and Family. New management. Fresh vision!" My ceramics, which usually sold for hundreds, were placed on gaudy, mismatched tablecloths, and the price tags were handwritten. I found Chloe, 27, leaning dramatically on a workbench in the back, scrolling through her phone, utterly oblivious to the subtle but critical difference between a decorative bowl and a functional mug. She wore a pristine white linen smock, a stark contrast to my clay-stained work clothes. She barely looked up. "Anya, you're home. Didn't expect you so early. Great timing, though." We were just about to discuss the partnership. She spoke with a smug, proprietary air that made me want to dunk her head in the slip bucket. I ignored her and went straight to the corner where the scut kiln had stood. It was spotless, the wiring cut clean. "Where is my kiln, Chloe?" I asked, my voice dangerously level. "Oh, Dad handled that. It was ancient, Anya. A fire hazard. You really need to thank him for protecting your investment." She made a mocking gesture of gratitude. I spent the next 2 days conducting my own silent investigation, relying heavily on Mark, who had been documenting everything out of pure spite for Chloe. I found that my father, Robert Bell, a retired engineer who thought his expertise extended to everything, hadn't removed a broken kiln. He had removed a perfectly functional one and replaced the space with a small, cheap desk for Chloe to manage inventory. He hadn't protected my investment. He had stolen my equipment to create office space for his favorite daughter. The slight changes my mother mentioned involved replacing my entire inventory management software with Chloe's old event planning spreadsheet, which was useless for retail. My class schedule was a mess. Chloe had canceled my advanced workshops, deeming them too intimidating, and replaced them with beginner classes focused on making fun, personalized gifts. The most egregious betrayal was the bank account. My parents had convinced the local branch manager, a family friend, to add Chloe as a signatory to the studio's business account, citing Ana's extended travel and emergency access. They hadn't drained the account, but the control was now shared 3 ways. This wasn't about Chloe needing a job. This was a hostile family takeover, orchestrated by my parents who had always favored Chloe's superficial charm over my hard-earned success. They saw my studio as a convenient, ready-made solution to their golden child's unemployment problem. The climax of my investigation came when my parents arrived for the planned family partnership pitch. They sat me down at my own workbench, which Chloe had draped with a floral cloth. My father slid a shoddy, 2-page document across the table. "Anya, we've formalized this. Chloe will handle the front of house, marketing, classes, sales. You stick to the back of house, making the pieces. We, as managing partners, will handle the finances. It's a perfect synergy. We can finally retire completely knowing our girls are working together." The document proposed splitting the studio's profits 3 ways, 40% for me, the person who did 100% of the labor and created the product, 30% for Chloe, the receptionist, and 30% for them, the controlling investors. It was an insult disguised as a retirement plan. The line in the contract that broke me read, "All creative decisions regarding the fire and family brand must be approved by the majority of the managing partners." They were planning to take my creativity, my intellectual property, and my life's work and dilute it down to a family brand, where I had no final say. My revenge started right then, a cold, professional smile, and a quiet agreement to review the document with my lawyer. They took that as acceptance. They had no idea they had just signed a death warrant for their partnership. My lawyer, the sharpest contract specialist in the city, took one look at the family partnership pitch document and swore under his breath, "Anya, this isn't a partnership proposal. It's a contract of indentured servitude." He outlined their strategy. They were leveraging the co-signed lease and the shared bank account to illegally seize control of the intellectual property, my brand name and unique designs, and the physical assets, the equipment. My parents' biggest tactical mistake was believing that their shared tenancy on the commercial lease gave them authority over my independently owned business, Fire and Form. Legally, the lease covered the space, not the assets within it. We had two major legal advantages. First, the stolen kiln. Though an old piece of equipment, its value was enough to constitute conversion of property, which is theft in a civil sense. We had Mark's detailed photos and a receipt showing my father had sold it to a local scrap dealer. This was powerful leverage. Second, and most critical, my intellectual property. Every single piece of pottery, every curriculum for my classes, and the original Fire and Form branding was registered solely in my name. Chloe's Fire and Family was an obvious infringement, and her class material was a plagiarized mess of my old lesson plans. The plan was not to sue immediately. That would be messy and slow. The plan was to execute a swift, surgical removal of my business from the physical location, rendering their control of the lease worthless, and then hit them with the legal consequences. We needed 2 weeks. My first step was deceptively simple: secure a new location. I found a perfect, slightly smaller, but beautifully renovated space 3 blocks away. I signed the lease, paid the first 3 months, and started transferring utilities. I kept everything classified, only informing Alex, my loyal assistant Marks, who was now fully on my team and happily accepting an enormous severance transfer bonus, and the movers. My second step was the financial split. Since they had already involved the family friend bank manager, I couldn't just empty the shared account. Instead, I opened a new business account solely in my name at a different bank. I legally documented every incoming cent from my current online sales and direct bank transfers, diverting them instantly to the new account. Then, I initiated a transfer from the shared account to my new account, not for the entire balance, but for the exact documented cost of the new kiln I purchased to replace the stolen one, plus the cost of the 4 months of classes Chloe had canceled. I left enough money in the old account to cover the next month's rent, proving I wasn't shirking financial responsibility. I sent a single, dry email to my parents and Chloe, seeking my lawyer, notifying them of the kiln replacement expense and the lost revenue recovery. The shock was immediate. My mother called instantly, screeching about draining the account. My father called, his engineering comm gone, demanding to know the name of my lawyer. My response was cold and professional. My lawyer advises all communication go through him regarding all Fire and Form assets, including the stolen kiln. I made sure to emphasize the word stolen. The final step was the extraction. It was scheduled for a Monday, when Chloe was running one of her fun gift beginner classes. I arrived with 2 moving vans, Mark, and 4 burly movers. I also brought a sheriff's deputy, cleared by my lawyer, with a document listing every piece of equipment, every clay body, every glaze, and every kiln registered under Anya Bell Fire and Form, LLC. As Chloe's class watched in horror, the movers systematically dismantled and removed my life's work: the main kiln, the 2 pottery wheels, the custom-built shelving, the clay mixer, and every single piece of finished art. I left them with the empty shell of a commercial space, a gaudy velvet rope, and a room full of beginners who now had no way to fire their personalized gifts. The studio was stripped bare in under 2 hours. Chloe's fun gift class scattered, some demanding refunds, others simply fleeing the scene of the domestic crisis. Chloe herself stood paralyzed, her white linen smock suddenly looking ridiculous against the empty, echoing walls of the commercial space that was no longer a studio. Her denial quickly turned to hysteria. "You can't do this! This is a family business now. Dad has the lease." "You're breaking the contract." I pulled out the court-sealed document, handing it to the deputy. I am removing the property of Ania Bell Fire and Form, LLC, which was converted by individuals not authorized to do so. The lease covers the space, deputy, not the assets. I looked directly at Chloe, whose eyes were wide with shock. You were never in a partnership with me, Chloe. You were an unauthorized trespasser who stole my equipment to make office space. As the last of my pottery wheels was wheeled out, my parents stormed in, having rushed over from their suburban home. My father, Robert, looked apoplectic.
Anya! What the hell is this? This is our property? We signed the lease?
You can't just steal the equipment. My mother, Eleanor, started weeping theatrically, instantly turning the event into a performance.
You are destroying your sister's livelihood! This is about family, Anya! We were trying to pitch you a partnership?
I held up a hand, silencing their combined hysteria. The partnership was a joke, Mother. It was a thinly veiled attempt to steal my intellectual property, my equipment, and 60% of my revenue. And Dad, your signature on the lease meant you were responsible for the space, not owners of the business. You committed conversion of property when you sold my kiln for scrap metal and lied about it. I have the receipt and Mark's testimony. I then addressed them both, my voice resonating in the empty space. I just moved Fire and Form 3 blocks away. It is now registered solely under Ania Bell. You own an empty, expensive commercial lease with a signed legal notice from my lawyer confirming that any attempt to use my name, my brand, or my class curriculum will result in a cease and desist followed by immediate litigation for intellectual property theft. Chloe finally found her voice, a raw, desperate squeak. But I told all my friends. We're having the grand opening for Fire and Family next Saturday. I've sent out invitations. This was the moment I had planned for. I smiled, a cold, surgical smile. No, Chloe. You are having a grand opening for an empty, stripped commercial space with no equipment, no inventory, and no legal right to use the name Fire and Family, which is a direct infringement on my registered trademark, Fire and Form. I turned to the deputy. I believe I have secured all my property, deputy. Thank you for your time. As I walked out, leaving the deputy to manage the meltdown, I heard my mother shrieking at my father. Robert, you said the lease protected us. You said she couldn't do this? And Chloe dissolving into hysterical sobs about her livelihood. I didn't look back. The revenge wasn't the anger, it was the cold, clinical dismantling of their entitlement. They had treated my life's work like a spare room to be repurposed. I treated their manipulative contract like the fraudulent garbage it was, and I was now free. My new studio awaited, ready for a true grand opening, built on a foundation of legal security and zero family interference. The grand opening for Fire and Family on the following Saturday was, predictably, a disaster. It wasn't the spectacular legal battle I had prepared for, it was a quiet, pathetic fizzle. Chloe, delusional and unwilling to admit defeat, tried to host the event anyway. She put out some borrowed chairs, set up a folding table with a pitiful display of store-bought cookies, and stood forlornly in the echoey, empty commercial space, explaining to the handful of confused friends and neighbors who showed up that the kilns were on order, and the ORT inventory was being appraised off-site. It was a visible, humiliating failure broadcast directly to their entire social circle. The truly satisfying part was happening 3 blocks away. My actual grand opening at the new Fire and Form studio was a massive success. My loyal students followed me. New customers were drawn by the local buzz, and perhaps the drama, and my work, displayed beautifully in the new, sleek space, sold out within 2 hours. We had champagne, a functioning kiln, and a huge sign proclaiming, Fire and Form Est, 2017, new location, same master ceramicist, 0 family partnerships. It was a silent, sparkling victory. The legal fallout, however, was just beginning. My father had to pay a substantial penalty to the scrap yard to buy back my old scut kiln, which he then had to deliver to my new studio location, under the supervision of my lawyer. A humiliating exercise in admitting guilt and conversion. I accepted the kiln, which was essential, but I made it clear it was not an acceptance of apology. I then sent a certified demand letter for the market rate of the 4 months of lost revenue from the classes Chloe canceled. the cost of the kiln replacement, since the one he returned was now officially used and not as new, and legal fees. The final financial blow was the commercial lease. My parents were locked into the expensive 3-year lease on the now empty commercial space. They were liable for all the rent, maintenance, and taxes. They tried everything to escape it. Subleasing, breaking the contract. But the terms were ironclad. They had leveraged their control, believing their signatures gave them ultimate power, and now they were stuck paying for an empty box, because they tried to steal my business. The subsequent family confrontation was held at their house, weeks after the double grand opening. The theatrical tears were gone, replaced by a sullen resentment. My mother, Eleanor, made one final, desperate plea for family unity.
Anya, we are your parents! This is not how you treat family!
Can't we just forgive and forget? Your sister needs a fresh start.
This is all so divisive.
I looked at my sister, Chloe, who wouldn't meet my gaze, and then at my parents. Forgive and forget. You didn't forget me when you seized my business, rebranded it, replaced me, and stole my equipment to give Chloe a desk. You didn't make a mistake. You made a calculated choice to prioritize Chloe's failure over my success, leveraging my trust and your financial signature to do it. You wanted a partnership. Here's the reality of the partnership. I am moving forward with my successful, legally protected business. You are moving forward with a massive debt from an empty commercial lease, and a daughter whose career you couldn't save, all because you tried to break me. This isn't divisive, it's consequence. Our partnership is officially fired. Any future communication about the studio must go through my lawyer. I stood up, leaving them with the crushing weight of their financial and emotional failure. The feeling wasn't triumph, it was relief. The greatest success of Fire and Form wasn't a perfect glaze or a high price tag. It was the ability to protect my life's work and my identity from the entitlement of my own family. I was free, my clay was safe, and the kiln was running hot again. Firing a future where I was the sole master of my destiny. I would be happy to add 2 more parts to the story, extending the narrative to cover the long-term consequences of the fired partnership. The debt of the empty commercial lease became a relentless, invisible hammer chipping away at my parents' retirement serenity. The space, located in a high-traffic area, was designed for a specific kind of retail and light industrial use. Not easy to sublease, especially with a massive, restrictive 3-year commitment hanging over their heads. My father, Robert, the retired engineer who prided himself on his financial foresight, became obsessed with the loss. He spent his days arguing with commercial real estate brokers and rereading the ironclad lease, terms he had so casually signed years ago, convinced there was a loophole he had missed. The irony was exquisite. He had kept his name on the lease for tax purposes and control, and now that control was crushing their financial stability. The money they had anticipated using for comfortable travel and early retirement was now funneled directly into the landlord's bank account. Every month, they had to downsize their plans significantly, selling off an investment property they intended to pass down to us. This created a new rift, as Chloe still expected a large financial bail out from them, viewing her unemployment as their responsibility. She continued to blame me for her livelihood being destroyed, completely ignoring the fact that she had simply moved into a fully established, lucrative business and ruined it by her own incompetence and the family's entitlement. My success, meanwhile, was undeniable. The move to the new location sparked renewed interest in Fire and Form. Without the distraction of family drama and the drag of the old, inefficient space, I was able to scale up my advanced workshops, drawing in serious students and professional artists. My work became even more focused and successful, leading to a prestigious gallery showing that secured me several high-profile commissions. My financial position was stronger than ever, built on a foundation of clean contracts and self-reliance. This contrast became the new focal point of the family's dysfunction. Instead of celebrating my success, my parents treated it as a personal offense. Every time I mentioned a new commission or a successful gallery event, my mother would sigh dramatically and mention the stress that my father was under because of the costly move. They tried to guilt me into paying a portion of the old lease, claiming I had abandoned the space. It was our investment in your future, Anya. My mother lamented over a strained Sunday dinner. You should help your father manage this burden. I calmly pointed out the facts. The lease was an investment in the space, which you took control of, and then attempted to leverage against my business. I didn't abandon the space, I removed my legitimate, privately owned assets to protect my livelihood from internal theft and an illegal hostile takeover. You are paying for the consequence of your actions, not the consequence of mine. I made it clear that any money I gave them would be viewed as settlement for the stolen kiln and the ongoing legal infringement on my trademark. And the conversation ended abruptly. The debt was a punishment they inflicted upon themselves, and I was not going to mitigate their pain. The financial stress led to constant arguments between Eleanor and Robert, pushing them further into a miserable retirement. Robert's attempt to exert control over my business ended with him losing control of his own money, a direct, agonizing result of his misplaced loyalty and patriarchal arrogance. The silence of the phone was often broken only by my parents' desperate, mumbled attempts to find a tenant, and the slow, grinding sound of their nest egg draining away. The weight of the empty lease was the poetic justice they couldn't escape. The ultimate resolution arrived not through a final, dramatic confrontation, but through the quiet, sustained proof of my independence and the failure of their family first philosophy. 2.5 years after the implosion of the partnership, the lease on the empty commercial space finally expired, leaving my parents financially wounded, but no longer hemorrhaging money monthly. This financial freedom, ironically, only highlighted the total lack of purpose in their retirement. They had no business to manage, and Chloe, after a disastrous, short-lived attempt at selling personalized gifts online that quickly failed due to poor quality and zero business sense, had moved away to another state, still seeking a career that required minimal effort and maximum reward. The distance between us solidified. I maintained contact, but strictly on my terms. With firm boundaries, no discussion of money, no discussion of the past studio, and absolutely no unsolicited business advice. I was cordial, but professionally detached. The final step in my complete separation from their control came unexpectedly. I decided to expand, needing more space for a new, larger kiln and additional storage for my rapidly growing wholesale business. I purchased my new commercial space outright, moving my business from rented property to a permanent, owned asset. It was a huge step, and one that required a significant loan. I didn't tell my parents about the purchase until the deal was closed. When I finally invited them to see the new, larger fire and form, the silence was different. It wasn't the heavy, judgmental silence of the past. It was a quiet, complex mixture of pride and regret. My father walked through the massive, dedicated space, looking at the two new kilns, the professional loading dock, and the state of the art ventilation system. He saw not a daughter needing help, but a successful entrepreneur who had completely eclipsed his own limited ambitions for me. He saw an investment, completely secure, that he had zero control over. My mother finally spoke, her voice softer than I had ever heard it. It's magnificent, Anya. Truly magnificent. Thank you, Mother, I said, without offering any of the reconciliation she clearly yearned for. It's secure, and it's mine. The unconventional partnership that emerged was with Mark, my former assistant. He had stayed with me through the move, proving his loyalty, competence, and talent. 6 months after moving into the new space, I offered Mark a true partnership, a 25% equity stake in the LLC, a profit-sharing scheme, and full creative control over the teaching curriculum. Our partnership was founded on documented skills, mutual respect, and legal contracts, the exact opposite of the entitled verbal agreement my parents tried to foist on me. When the news of Mark's real partnership reached my parents, it served as the final, enduring lesson. I hadn't rejected the concept of collaboration. I had simply rejected their version of it. I chose a partner who added value, respected boundaries, and earned his place, solidifying a professional future built on merit, not blood relation. The saga of the studio became a cautionary tale in the family. The daughter who was too driven escaped, flourished, and secured her financial future, while the parents and sister who tried to take advantage were left with nothing but regret and debt. I remained the master ceramicist, forever secure in my own fire and form, the scars of the past, now beautifully glazed over into a finished work of art.